Have you ever feared something that later saved your life? In this small Texas town, a widow terrified of dogs and a heroic golden retriever cross paths during a fierce storm, changing everything. Watch how one unexpected encounter transforms grief into purpose and turns strangers into family. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe now for more inspiring stories of second chances. The church bells of Mill Creek, Texas chimed 3 times before falling silent against the backdrop of an approaching storm. Dark clouds loomed over the small town where everyone knew each other's business almost as well as they knew the back roads. Miss Edna Matthews sat on her weathered porch swing, her arthritis-stiffened fingers clutching a cup of chamomile tea that had long since gone cold. At 70 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and deep-set hazel eyes that had seen too much heartache lately, she watched the storm roll in with a detached expression. 6 months, she whispered to the empty chair beside her. 6 months since you left me, Harold. The winds picked up, causing the wind chimes Harold had hung 5 summers ago to dance wildly. Edna had left them up, unable to remove one more piece of him from her life. Inside her modest farmhouse, framed photographs told the story of 52 years of marriage. High school sweethearts who'd built a life, raised 2 children who now lived on opposite coasts, and weathered every storm together until cancer took Harold in his sleep. Now Edna faced each day alone, her only regular company being the ladies from the Mill Creek Quilting Club who checked in on her with casseroles and concern. The first fat raindrops began to fall as Deputy Sam Thornton finished his patrol on County Road 22. At 34, Sam had returned to his hometown after a stint with the Dallas PD, preferring the quiet life after witnessing too much violence in the city. His dark brown hair was cut military short, and the lines around his blue eyes had deepened in recent years. Dispatch, this is Thornton. I'm checking out reports of missing pets near the old Miller property, then heading in. This storm's about to break loose. Copy that, Deputy. Be careful out there. Weather Service just upgraded to severe thunderstorm warning, came the crackling reply. Sam's cruiser headlights cut through the gathering darkness as he turned down the gravel road. Reports of missing animals had been increasing over the past month. Cats, small dogs, even some livestock. Most townsfolk blamed coyotes, but something didn't sit right with Sam. Meanwhile, unnoticed by either Edna or Sam, a golden retriever with matted fur and a slight limp made his way along the outskirts of town. His once shiny coat was dulled with mud and burrs, his ribs showing through his sides. He moved with purpose despite his obvious exhaustion, occasionally stopping to sniff the air as thunder rumbled overhead. The storm hit with biblical fury. Lightning split the sky as Sam's cruiser approached the abandoned Miller barn. Switching on his flashlight, he stepped out into the deluge, the beam cutting through sheets of rain. A strange noise had caught his attention, not quite an animal cry, but something that raised the hairs on the back of his neck. "Hello," he called out, his voice nearly drowned by thunder. "Anyone out here?" His foot caught on something, a chain, partially buried in mud. As he bent to examine it, his police instincts screaming that something was very wrong, he didn't notice the slick embankment or the rushing water already cutting a channel through the low ground beside him. In Miss Edna's kitchen, the old woman startled at a scratch at her back door. Peering through the rain-streaked window, she gasped at the sight of a soaked golden retriever sitting patiently on her back step. "Good Lord," she murmured, her heart racing. Dogs had terrified her since childhood when a neighbor's German shepherd had attacked her, leaving scars both physical and emotional. Yet something in this animal's intelligent eyes held her gaze. Against every instinct, Edna cracked open the door. "Go on now," she said shakily. "Shoo." The dog didn't move. Instead, he whined softly, his eyes seemingly pleading with her. Then he backed up, turned, and barked once before looking back at her expectantly. "I'm not following you out in this storm," Edna said firmly, closing the door despite the pang of guilt she felt. Little did she know that at that very moment, Deputy Sam Thornton lay unconscious at the bottom of a muddy embankment, the rising waters threatening to claim him, while the golden retriever who would soon be known as Duke throughout Mill Creek was desperately seeking help from the only human who had shown him a moment's kindness in weeks. The rain hammered against Edna's windows with such ferocity that she could barely hear the persistent barking outside. She had retreated to her living room, settling into Harold's old recliner with a quilt wrapped around her shoulders. The golden retriever had remained on her back porch for nearly 20 minutes, alternating between scratching at the door and barking insistently. "Lord have mercy," Edna muttered, finally reaching for the phone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Beatrice Wilkins, her closest friend and president of the Mill Creek Quilting Club. "B, there's a stray dog that won't leave my porch. You know how I feel about dogs." "In this storm?" "Poor thing," Beatrice replied. "Want me to call animal control? At this hour? In this weather?" Edna sighed. "I don't know what he wants, but he seems desperate." As if on cue, a particularly violent crash of thunder shook the house, and the power flickered once before plunging the home into darkness. "Edna, you still there?" Beatrice's voice crackled through the phone. "Power's out," Edna replied, fumbling for the flashlight she kept in the side table drawer. "I'll call you back." In the beam of her flashlight, Edna noticed the dog was no longer at her back door. Peering through the window, she caught a glimpse of golden fur disappearing into the stormy night. Something about the animal's determination stirred something within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced since Harold's diagnosis. "Concern. I must be losing my mind," she muttered, grabbing her late husband's rain slicker from the hook by the door. She hadn't left the house after dark in months, but something compelled her to follow. Meanwhile, on the muddy embankment near the old Miller property, Deputy Sam Thornton lay motionless as water began to pool around him. His flashlight, still clutched in his hand, cast an eerie beam through the darkness. Blood from a gash on his forehead mixed with rainwater streaming down his face. The golden retriever had returned, soaking wet and panting heavily. He nudged the unconscious man with his nose, whining softly. When Sam didn't respond, the dog grabbed the sleeve of his uniform jacket between his teeth and pulled. Despite his own injuries and exhaustion, the dog strained against the deputy's weight, dragging him inch by painful inch away from the rising water. Edna stumbled down her driveway, flashlight wavering in the storm. "Hello," she called out, her voice thin against the wind. "Dog, where are you?" She felt ridiculous, an old woman chasing after a stray in a thunderstorm. What would Harold say? He'd always been her protector, the one who handled emergencies. Now here she was, alone in the dark, following some inexplicable instinct. The dog had managed to drag Sam about 15 feet toward the main road when his strength began to give out. Collapsing beside the deputy, he raised his head and howled, a sound so mournful and desperate it cut through the storm. Edna heard it. Something about that howl chilled her more than the rain seeping through her clothes. She changed direction, heading toward County Road 22, her heart pounding painfully against her ribs. "Oh my God," she gasped, her flashlight beam finding first the dog, then the unconscious form of Deputy Thornton. "Sam? Sam!" The dog looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. He barked once, then nudged Sam's hand. Fighting her fear, Edna knelt beside them, her arthritic knees protesting against the mud. She pressed trembling fingers to Sam's neck, relieved to find a pulse. "Good boy," she whispered to the dog, surprising herself. "You found help." The retriever wagged his tail weakly. Edna fumbled for her cell phone, thanking God for the waterproof case her grandson had insisted she needed. "This is Edna Matthews," she told the 911 operator, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've found Deputy Thornton injured on County Road 22, about a quarter-mile from my place. He's unconscious but breathing. Stay with him, Mrs. Matthews," the operator instructed. "Emergency services are on their way, but the storm has downed trees on several roads." As they waited, Edna found herself talking to the dog, who had positioned himself protectively between her and the unconscious deputy. "Where did you come from?" she wondered aloud. "Whoever trained you did a fine job." The retriever's eyes never left Sam's face, as if willing him to wake up. Through the rain and darkness, Edna noticed the dog's injured paw and protruding ribs. "You're hurt too," she said softly, "but you still helped him." When the ambulance finally arrived, its lights painting the rain-slicked road in pulses of red and white, the paramedics worked quickly to stabilize Sam. One of them, a young woman named Jessica, noticed the dog. "He found the deputy," Edna explained, standing aside as they loaded Sam onto a stretcher. "Came to my door first, tried to get me to follow him." "Smart boy," Jessica commented. "Like something out of Lassie." As they prepared to transport Sam to Mill Creek Memorial Hospital, Edna found herself facing a decision. The dog stood watching the activity, swaying slightly with exhaustion. "What about him?" she asked Jessica. "He needs care too. Animal control's backed up with the storm," Jessica replied. "Could be hours before they get out here." Edna looked at the dog. This creature she would have avoided at all costs just hours earlier. "I'll take him," she heard herself say, "just until his owner is found." The storm had subsided by morning, leaving Mill Creek in a state of soggy disarray. Edna stood at her kitchen window, watching the golden retriever she'd reluctantly brought home sleeping on a pile of old blankets in the corner. She dried him as best she could with Harold's old towels, wincing at the sight of his injuries up close. A gash on his hindquarters, raw paws, and a body so thin it broke her heart. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself, clutching her morning coffee like a lifeline. Mill Creek Memorial Hospital had called an hour earlier. Deputy Thornton was in stable condition with a concussion and a broken arm. He'd regained consciousness, but remembered nothing of his accident or rescue. The phone rang again, startling both Edna and the dog, who lifted his head alertly. "Edna Matthews? This is Shirley from the Mill Creek Gazette. Word's going around town that you and a stray dog rescued Deputy Thornton last night. Can I get a statement?" Edna sighed. Small-town news traveled at the speed of light. "It wasn't me, Shirley. It was all the dog. He found Sam and then came to get me." "Remarkable," Shirley exclaimed. "Like something out of a movie. Does this hero have a name?" Edna glanced at the dog, who was now watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. "No collar, no tags. Just a stray, I suppose." "Every hero needs a name," Shirley persisted. For the article, looking at the regal way the dog held himself despite his condition, Edna found herself saying, "Duke. I suppose he looks like a duke." After hanging up, Edna approached Duke cautiously. He thumped his tail against the floor, but didn't move, as if sensing her nervousness. "So, Duke," she said, testing the name. "I've called Dr. Winters. He'll be by later to check you over. Then we'll find out where you belong." The local veterinarian, Marcus Winters, arrived mid-morning. A burly man with gentle hands, he knelt beside Duke, who allowed the examination with calm dignity. "He's got some training," Dr. Winters observed, checking Duke's teeth. "High-quality dog, probably 2 or 3 years old. Golden retrievers are known for their intelligence and loyalty, but this level of intuitive rescue behavior is exceptional." "Will he be okay?" Edna asked, surprising herself with her concern. "With proper care, yes. He's malnourished, dehydrated, and has some lacerations that need treatment. I'd say he's been on his own for weeks." The vet glanced up at Edna. "I can take him to the clinic if you'd prefer." Edna hesitated, looking at Duke, who gazed back steadily. "No," she finally said. "I'll keep him, just until his owner is found," she added hastily. After Dr. Winters left with instructions for Duke's care, Edna's phone began ringing incessantly. The story had spread through town like wildfire. By noon, Beatrice and 3 other members of the quilting club had arrived on her doorstep, bearing food and dog supplies. "Oh, Edna," Beatrice exclaimed, bustling into the kitchen with a casserole. "You're a town hero, and this must be Duke." Martha Jenkins, the librarian, set down bags of dog food and treats. "I've already put a notice on the community board about a found dog," she said. "And I'll check missing pet databases. The whole town's talking about it," added Ruth Simmons, Mill Creek's retired schoolteacher. "Deputy Thornton would have drowned if not for this dog." Edna watched as her friends cooed over Duke, who accepted their attention with gentle dignity. "I'm just fostering him," she insisted. "I've never been a dog person." "Never say never," Ruth said with a knowing smile. "Life has a way of surprising us." That evening, after her friends had left, Edna found herself sitting on the porch swing with Duke resting at her feet. For the first time since Harold's death, the silence felt companionable rather than oppressive. "You know," she said softly to Duke, "Harold always wanted a dog. I was the one who said no." Duke lifted his head, ears perked as if listening intently. "I was 9 when a neighbor's dog attacked me," she continued, unconsciously touching the faint scar on her forearm. 17 stitches. I've been afraid ever since." Duke rose slowly, mindful of his injuries, and placed his head gently on her lap. Edna froze momentarily, then, with a trembling hand, stroked his golden head. "Aren't you something?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. coming into my life like this. Inside, the phone rang again, but Edna let it go to voicemail. For the first time in months, she wasn't rushing to answer, hoping it would be one of her distant children checking in. Instead, she sat with Duke as twilight fell over Mill Creek, watching fireflies emerge in her garden. Just until your owner is found, she reminded both Duke and herself. But as the golden retriever sighed contentedly under her touch, Edna Matthews felt something shift within her, a small, fragile opening where grief had previously sealed her shut. The next morning, Edna woke to the unfamiliar sound of paws padding across her hardwood floors. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, she reached for Harold before reality crashed back. Harold was gone, and she now had a dog named Duke temporarily living in her home. She found Duke sitting patiently by the back door, his tail sweeping the floor when he saw her. "Need to go out, boy?" she asked, cautiously opening the door. Duke limped into the backyard, still favoring his injured paw despite Dr. Winter's treatment. While making her morning coffee, Edna noticed the Mill Creek Gazette on her porch. The headline made her grimace: "Hero Dog and Widow Saved Deputy's Life." Beneath was a photo someone had snapped of the ambulance scene, with Duke sitting regally beside a shocked-looking Edna. "We're famous," she told Duke when he returned inside. "Not sure I like that much." She had just finished her breakfast when a knock came at the door. Opening it, she found Deputy Sam Thornton standing on her porch, his arm in a cast and a bandage on his forehead. "Miss Edna," he said respectfully, removing his hat with his good hand. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Sam Thornton, should you be out of the hospital already?" Edna chided, ushering him inside. "Signed myself out this morning," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "Couldn't stay there knowing what you and that dog did for me." His eyes scanned the room. "Is he here?" As if on cue, Duke appeared from the kitchen, approaching the deputy with cautious recognition. "This is him," Sam murmured, kneeling despite his injuries. "The dog who saved my life." Duke sniffed Sam's outstretched hand, then allowed the man to gently pet his head. "The doctors said I would have drowned or died from exposure if you two hadn't found me," Sam said, looking up at Edna. "I came to thank you both." "It was all Duke," Edna insisted, gesturing to the dog. "He found you, dragged you from the water, then came to get me." Sam's expression grew serious. "Miss Edna, I wasn't just out on routine patrol that night. I've been investigating a string of animal disappearances in the county. Small pets at first, then larger dogs, even some livestock." Edna settled into her armchair, frowning. "Coyotes. That's what everyone assumes, but I don't think so. Too organized, too targeted." Sam looked at Duke thoughtfully. "I was checking out the old Miller property when I fell. There have been reports of unusual activity there." Duke's ears perked up at the mention of the Miller property, his body tensing visibly. "Look at that," Sam said quietly. "He recognizes something about what I'm saying." "He's a smart one," Edna agreed, noting Duke's reaction. "Dr. Winters thinks he's had professional training." Sam nodded, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his concussion. "I'm wondering if Duke might be connected to what I was investigating. Perhaps he escaped from wherever these animals are being taken. But why would anyone be stealing pets?" Edna asked, horrified at the thought. Sam's expression darkened. "There's money in it. Dogfighting rings, illegal breeding operations, even research facilities that don't ask questions about where their animals come from." The mere suggestion made Edna's heart ache. She looked at Duke, imagining him in such conditions. "What can we do?" "For now, keep him safe," Sam advised. "I've put in a call to check missing animal databases in neighboring counties, but it might take time." He scratched Duke behind the ears. "In the meantime, I'd like to come back when I'm steadier on my feet. Maybe Duke can help with the investigation." After Sam left, Edna sat with Duke on the porch swing, her hand absently stroking his golden coat. "Who are you really?" she wondered aloud. "And what happened to you?" That afternoon, the quilting club gathered at Edna's house for their weekly meeting, eager to meet the famous Duke. The living room filled with the chatter of 6 elderly women, their sewing baskets and quilting frames transforming the space. "He's magnificent," Martha declared, offering Duke a treat that he accepted with gentle manners. "And to think you've been afraid of dogs all these years," Ruth added, giving Edna a knowing look. "I still am," Edna protested, though with less conviction than before. "This is temporary." Beatrice, always practical, raised an important point. "We should look into his background. A dog like this doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Deputy Thornton is already checking, Edna explained, sharing what Sam had told her about the missing animals. Well, I heard something interesting at the beauty parlor yesterday, said Eleanor Porter, the town's most reliable source of gossip. Marge Wilson's nephew works for the county animal shelter 2 counties over. Apparently, they had a search and rescue dog go missing during the floods last spring. Golden retriever, just like Duke. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Duke, who lay peacefully at Edna's feet. A search and rescue dog, Edna repeated softly. That would explain how he knew to find help. I'll have my grandson check online, Beatrice offered, pulling out her phone. These days, everything gets posted on social media. As the women continued their quilting, the conversation turned to Duke's future. What will you do if they find his original owner? Martha asked gently, Edna's hand stilled on her quilt square. The question had been nagging at her since Duke arrived, though she'd tried to ignore it. The right thing, she answered finally, not meeting anyone's eyes. Whatever that may be. That night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm approaching, Edna lay awake listening to Duke's soft breathing from his bed beside hers. Somehow, in just a few days, she'd gone from fearing dogs to finding comfort in this one's presence. Harold, she whispered into the darkness, I think you'd be proud of me facing my fears, but I'm afraid I'm setting myself up for another heartbreak. 3 weeks passed, and Duke had become a fixture in Edna's home. His wounds had healed remarkably under her care, his golden coat regaining its luster and his limping nearly gone. Dr. Winters had pronounced him in excellent health during their last checkup, marveling at his recovery. He was meant to find you, Edna, the veterinarian had said with a smile. And you him. Edna had scoffed at the sentiment, but privately, she couldn't deny the change in her life since Duke's arrival. Her days now had structure beyond grief. Morning walks along the creek behind her property, afternoon training sessions where Duke demonstrated his impressive repertoire of commands, and evenings on the porch where she'd taken to reading aloud while he listened attentively. Her quilting friends had noticed the transformation. You're standing taller, Beatrice commented during their latest meeting. And there's color in your cheeks again. It's just all the walking, Edna replied dismissively, though she knew it was more than that. Duke had given her something she'd lost when Harold died, a reason to keep going. Deputy Sam Thornton had become a regular visitor, stopping by every few days to check on them and update Edna on his investigation. Today, he stood in her kitchen, cup of coffee in hand, watching Duke through the window as the dog patrolled the backyard with methodical precision. He's definitely had professional training, Sam observed. The way he quarters the yard, checking boundaries, that's not pet behavior. Have you found anything about his past? Edna asked, setting a plate of cookies on the table. Harold's favorites, snickerdoodles. She'd stopped baking after his death, until Duke came along. Sam shook his head. Nothing definitive. There was a search and rescue dog reported missing during the Canyon Creek landslide last year, a golden retriever named Scout. But the description doesn't quite match. That dog had distinctive white chest markings. Edna frowned, watching Duke. He could have been a stray all this time, I suppose. Unlikely, Sam replied. His training is too ingrained. Someone invested time in him. He hesitated before continuing. Edna, I have a favor to ask. I'm going back to investigate the Miller property tomorrow. The county judge finally signed the search warrant. I'd like to bring Duke. Why? She asked sharply, protective instinct flaring. His reaction when I mentioned it before was notable, and dogs with his training can sometimes pick up on things we miss. Seeing her concern, Sam added gently, I'll keep him safe, I promise. Edna didn't answer immediately. The thought of Duke returning to a potentially dangerous place made her stomach clench with anxiety. But she also couldn't deny Sam's logic. I want to come too, she said finally, surprising them both. Miss Edna, it could be dangerous. If I'm right about what's happening there, Duke trusts me, she interrupted, a steel in her voice that Harold would have recognized, the same tone she'd used when the doctors suggested hospice care too early. And I know that property. Harold and I used to be friendly with the Millers before they passed. Their son hasn't done anything with it in years. Sam looked ready to argue, but seemed to think better of it. All right, he conceded. But you stay in the car unless I say otherwise. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Edna dressed in practical clothes. Jeans she hadn't worn in years, sturdy boots, and one of Harold's old flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him. Duke seemed to sense the importance of the day, staying close to her side with an alertness she'd come to recognize as his working demeanor. Sam arrived in his department SUV rather than the patrol car, explaining that they needed to maintain a low profile. The property backs up to state forest land, he explained as they drove. Makes it isolated enough for suspicious activity. As they approached the turnoff to the Miller farm, Duke's behavior changed dramatically. He moved to the edge of his seat, ears forward, body tense. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "He knows this place," Sam said quietly, exchanging a look with Edna. The old Miller farmhouse sat dark and apparently abandoned, its paint peeling and porch sagging. But the large barn behind it showed signs of recent use, fresh tire tracks in the gravel drive, a new padlock on the door. "Stay here," Sam instructed Edna, checking his sidearm. "Duke, come." To Edna's surprise, Duke looked to her for confirmation. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the bond they'd formed. "Go on, boy," she encouraged, though her heart pounded with apprehension. Sam and Duke approached the barn cautiously. Through the windshield, Edna watched Duke's body language, alert but controlled, moving with the precision she'd observed in his yard patrols. They disappeared around the side of the structure, leaving Edna gripping the dashboard, straining to see. Minutes ticked by, each feeling like an hour. Then Duke's bark, sharp, insistent, sent birds scattering from nearby trees. The sound was followed by Sam's voice, too distant to make out the words but urgent in tone. Edna couldn't stand it any longer. Against Sam's instructions, she climbed out of the SUV and hurried toward the barn, her fear for Duke overriding caution. As she rounded the corner, she found Sam on his radio, calling for backup, while Duke scratched frantically at a cellar door set into the ground. "Edna, I told you to stay in the car," Sam admonished, but his heart wasn't in it. Duke found something. There are sounds coming from underground. Before she could respond, the rumble of an approaching vehicle caught their attention. A pickup truck was barreling down the gravel drive, dust billowing behind it. "Get behind the barn," Sam ordered, his tone brooking no argument this time. "Take Duke with you," Edna called to Duke, who reluctantly abandoned his scratching to follow her. They pressed themselves against the weathered wood as the truck skidded to a stop. Through a crack in the boards, Edna could see two men jump out, one heavy-set with a bushy beard, the other younger and wiry. "What the hell are you doing on private property?" the bearded man demanded, his hand ominously close to his jacket pocket. "Sheriff's Department," Sam replied calmly, showing his badge. "I have a warrant to search these premises in connection with reports of stolen animals." The younger man glanced nervously at the cellar door. "You got no right. This is harassment." "I've got every right," Sam countered, unfolding the warrant. "And my backup will be here any minute." At that moment, Duke tensed beside Edna, a growl building in his chest. She gripped his collar, whispering, "Shoo, boy." But it was too late. The bearded man's head snapped toward the sound. "You hear that, Mike? He brought a dog. Could be the one that got away," the younger man said, his voice dropping. Edna's blood ran cold at the implication. These men knew Duke, and whatever they had planned for him before, it hadn't been good. 3 weeks passed, and Duke had become a fixture in Edna's home. His wounds had healed remarkably under her care, his golden coat regaining its luster and his limping nearly gone. Dr. Winters had pronounced him in excellent health during their last checkup, marveling at his recovery. "He was meant to find you, Edna," the veterinarian had said with a smile. "And you him." Edna had scoffed at the sentiment, but privately, she couldn't deny the change in her life since Duke's arrival. Her days now had structure beyond grief. Morning walks along the creek behind her property, afternoon training sessions where Duke demonstrated his impressive repertoire of commands, and evenings on the porch where she'd taken to reading aloud while he listened attentively. Her quilting friends had noticed the transformation. "You're standing taller," Beatrice commented during their latest meeting. "And there's color in your cheeks again." "It's just all the walking," Edna replied dismissively, though she knew it was more than that. Duke had given her something she'd lost when Harold died, a reason to keep going. Deputy Sam Thornton had become a regular visitor, stopping by every few days to check on them and update Edna on his investigation. Today, he stood in her kitchen, cup of coffee in hand, watching Duke through the window as the dog patrolled the backyard with methodical precision. He's definitely had professional training, Sam observed. The way he quarters the yard, checking boundaries, that's not pet behavior. Have you found anything about his past? Edna asked, setting a plate of cookies on the table. Harold's favorites, snickerdoodles. She'd stopped baking after his death, until Duke came along. Sam shook his head. Nothing definitive. There was a search and rescue dog reported missing during the Canyon Creek landslide last year. A golden retriever named Scout. But the description doesn't quite match. That dog had distinctive white chest markings. Edna frowned, watching Duke. He could have been a stray all this time, I suppose. Unlikely, Sam replied. His training is too ingrained. Someone invested time in him. He hesitated before continuing. Edna, I have a favor to ask. I'm going back to investigate the Miller property tomorrow. The county judge finally signed the search warrant. I'd like to bring Duke. Why? She asked sharply, protective instinct flaring. His reaction when I mentioned it before was notable, and dogs with his training can sometimes pick up on things we miss. Seeing her concern, Sam added gently, I'll keep him safe, I promise. Edna didn't answer immediately. The thought of Duke returning to a potentially dangerous place made her stomach clench with anxiety. But she also couldn't deny Sam's logic. I want to come too, she said finally, surprising them both. Miss Edna, it could be dangerous. If I'm right about what's happening there, Duke trusts me, she interrupted, a steel in her voice that Harold would have recognized. The same tone she'd used when the doctors suggested hospice care too early. And I know that property. Harold and I used to be friendly with the Millers before they passed. Their son hasn't done anything with it in years. Sam looked ready to argue, but seemed to think better of it. All right, he conceded. But you stay in the car unless I say otherwise. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Edna dressed in practical clothes. Jeans she hadn't worn in years, sturdy boots, and one of Harold's old flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him. Duke seemed to sense the importance of the day, staying close to her side with an alertness she'd come to recognize as his working demeanor. Sam arrived in his department SUV rather than the patrol car, explaining that they needed to maintain a low profile. The property backs up to state forest land, he explained as they drove. Makes it isolated enough for suspicious activity. As they approached the turnoff to the Miller farm, Duke's behavior changed dramatically. He moved to the edge of his seat, ears forward, body tense. A low growl rumbled in his chest. He knows this place, Sam said quietly, exchanging a look with Edna. The old Miller farmhouse sat dark and apparently abandoned, its paint peeling and porch sagging. But the large barn behind it showed signs of recent use, fresh tire tracks in the gravel drive, a new padlock on the door. Stay here, Sam instructed Edna, checking his sidearm. Duke, come. To Edna's surprise, Duke looked to her for confirmation. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the bond they'd formed. Go on, boy, she encouraged, though her heart pounded with apprehension. Sam and Duke approached the barn cautiously. Through the windshield, Edna watched Duke's body language, alert but controlled, moving with the precision she'd observed in his yard patrols. They disappeared around the side of the structure, leaving Edna gripping the dashboard, straining to see. Minutes ticked by, each feeling like an hour. Then Duke's bark, sharp, insistent, sent birds scattering from nearby trees. The sound was followed by Sam's voice, too distant to make out the words but urgent in tone. Edna couldn't stand it any longer. Against Sam's instructions, she climbed out of the SUV and hurried toward the barn, her fear for Duke overriding caution. As she rounded the corner, she found Sam on his radio, calling for backup, while Duke scratched frantically at a cellar door set into the ground. Edna, I told you to stay in the car, Sam admonished, but his heart wasn't in it. Duke found something. There are sounds coming from underground. Before she could respond, the rumble of an approaching vehicle caught their attention. A pickup truck was barreling down the gravel drive, dust billowing behind it. Get behind the barn, Sam ordered, his tone brooking no argument this time. Take Duke with you. Edna called to Duke, who reluctantly abandoned his scratching to follow her. They pressed themselves against the weathered wood as the truck skidded to a stop. Through a crack in the boards, Edna could see two men jump out, one heavy-set with a bushy beard, the other younger and wiry. What the hell are you doing on private property? The bearded man demanded, his hand ominously close to his jacket pocket. Sheriff's Department, Sam replied calmly, showing his badge. I have a warrant to search these premises in connection with reports of stolen animals. The younger man glanced nervously at the cellar door. You got no right. This is harassment. I've got every right, Sam countered, unfolding the warrant. And my backup will be here any minute. At that moment, Duke tensed beside Edna, a growl building in his chest. She gripped his collar, whispering, "Shoo, boy." But it was too late. The bearded man's head snapped toward the sound. You hear that, Mike? He brought a dog. Could be the one that got away, the younger man said, his voice dropping. Edna's blood ran cold at the implication. These men knew Duke, and whatever they had planned for him before, it hadn't been good. The air grew thick with tension as Sam kept his composure, positioning himself between the men and the cellar door. Edna's heart hammered in her chest as Duke's growl deepened beside her. That sounds like a dog. All right, the bearded man said, taking a step forward. One of our hunting dogs must have gotten loose. We've been looking everywhere for him. Is that so? Sam replied, his tone deceptively casual. Funny, because this particular dog saved my life 3 weeks ago. Found him with Miss Edna Matthews. Golden Retriever, professionally trained. The younger man, Mike, shot a nervous glance at his companion. Lots of Golden Retrievers around. Doesn't mean it's ours. Then you won't mind if we open this cellar and take a look inside, Sam said, his hand resting on his holster. My warrant covers all structures on the property. The bearded man's face darkened. Listen, deputy, you're making a mistake. We're just leasing this land for storage. Storage of what exactly? Sam pressed. A distant siren wailed, growing louder. Backup was approaching. The men exchanged glances, clearly calculating their options. Beside Edna, Duke suddenly stiffened, his attention riveted on the cellar door. Then he bolted, streaking past her so quickly she couldn't grab him. He charged around the corner, barking fiercely as he positioned himself between the men and the cellar. Duke, Edna cried, abandoning her hiding place to follow. The bearded man's eyes widened at the sight of Duke. That's definitely our dog, he said, reaching slowly into his jacket. Don't, Sam warned, drawing his weapon. Hands where I can see them. Everything happened at once. The bearded man lunged toward Duke. Sam shouted a warning. Edna screamed Duke's name, and from inside the cellar, a chorus of frantic barking erupted. Police. Freeze. 2 county sheriff cruisers skidded into the yard, deputies emerging with weapons drawn. Within minutes, the men were in handcuffs, and the deputies were breaking the lock on the cellar door. The stench that emerged when they opened it made Edna gag. The unmistakable smell of too many animals kept in filthy conditions. Jesus Christ, Sam muttered as they descended the stairs. The cellar had been converted into a makeshift kennel. Cages stacked along the walls containing dogs of various breeds, all thin and many with injuries consistent with dogfighting. They were using this place as a holding facility, one of the deputies explained as animal control officers arrived to begin the rescue operation. They steal pets, train the aggressive ones to fight, use the smaller ones as bait. Edna felt sick. She sat on an overturned bucket outside the barn, Duke pressed against her legs, watching as cage after cage was brought up and loaded into transport vehicles. Sam approached, his face grim. 17 dogs and 3 cats, all reported missing from counties around here. And based on the paperwork we found, they've been moving dogs through here for months. Was Duke one of them? Edna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam crouched down to eye level with the Golden Retriever. I don't think so. There's no record of him in their files. But he hesitated. He clearly knows this place. Maybe he escaped during a transport, or was brought here but managed to get away before they processed him. Duke whined softly, pressing closer to Edna's legs. He was trying to tell us all along, she realized, remembering how Duke had reacted whenever the Miller property was mentioned. That's why he was on that road the night you were hurt. He was trying to find help for the others. Sam nodded, a look of profound respect crossing his face as he regarded Duke. He's extraordinary. The drive back to Edna's house was quiet, all 3 of them emotionally drained by the day's events. As they pulled into her driveway, Sam turned to her with a serious expression. Edna, I need to tell you something. The county's going to want to publicize this rescue. It's the biggest animal fighting ring bust in the state's history, and Duke's role in leading us to it. Well, it's the kind of story people connect with. There's going to be attention. Edna sighed, stroking Duke's head. I suppose that can't be helped. There's more, Sam continued. Now that we know Duke's not just a stray, the department's going to feel obligated to find his original owner. They'll want to run his microchip, put his information in national databases. Edna felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She'd been avoiding this reality for weeks, pretending their arrangement was temporary while secretly hoping Duke would somehow remain unclaimed. I understand, she said finally, her voice surprisingly steady despite the ache in her heart. It's the right thing to do. That evening, as news of the bust spread through Mill Creek, Edna's phone rang constantly. Her quilting friends arrived with food and support, clustering in her kitchen and taking turns praising Duke, who accepted the attention with dignified patience. What will you do if they find his owner? Beatrice asked the question everyone was thinking but had been too tactful to voice. Edna watched Duke, now dozing on his bed in the corner of her living room. In just 3 short weeks, he'd transformed her life, given her purpose, companionship, and the courage to begin moving forward after Harold's death. I'll do what's right, she said softly. If Duke belongs to someone who loves him, who's been searching for him, then they deserve to have him back. And if they haven't been looking? Ruth pressed. If no one claims him? A small, hopeful smile touched Edna's lips. Then I suppose I'll have to learn to be a dog person after all. Later that night, alone with Duke, Edna sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. Duke rested his head on her lap, his warm weight comforting against the evening chill. You're a hero twice over now, she told him, scratching behind his ears. First saving Sam, then leading us to those other poor creatures. Her voice caught. I don't know what you've been through, boy, but I do know one thing. You deserve a good home, whether that's with me or someone else. Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough. Duke lifted his head, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intelligence that sometimes took her breath away. Then he licked her hand once, gently, before settling back against her. In that quiet moment, Edna Matthews made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, she would make sure Duke had the life he deserved. She owed him at least that much. And maybe, just maybe, in the process of saving him, she might finish saving herself. The following morning, Edna woke to the sound of her doorbell. Still in her robe, she hurried to answer, Duke following close behind. On her porch stood Dr. Winters, holding a small electronic device. Morning, Edna. Hope I'm not too early, he said, petting Duke's head. Sam asked me to come by and scan Duke's microchip. Most rescues and reputable breeders chip their dogs these days. Edna nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She'd known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. Come in, Marcus. Would you like some coffee? That'd be wonderful, he replied, following her into the kitchen. As Edna prepared the coffee, Dr. Winters ran the scanner over Duke's shoulders. The device beeped almost immediately. Got it, he announced. Now we'll run this number through the national database and see if anyone's looking for our hero. Edna's hands trembled slightly as she set the coffee mugs on the table. How long will that take? Usually just a day or two, Dr. Winters replied, accepting the steaming mug gratefully. Edna, I know you've grown attached to him, but if someone's been searching, I know, she interrupted. I've been telling myself that since he arrived. Dr. Winters studied her face, his expression compassionate. You've done an amazing job with him. Either way, you should be proud. After he left, Edna sank onto the sofa, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Duke promptly jumped up beside her, something she'd initially forbidden but now secretly cherished. What am I going to do if I have to give you up? She whispered, burying her face in his golden fur. Her phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Sam. Edna, there's something you should know, he began without preamble. The story's hitting the news. The county prosecutor held a press conference about the dogfighting bust. They mentioned Duke. What did they say? She asked, dread building. They're calling him a hero dog. And a television crew from Austin wants to interview you. They'll be here tomorrow. Me? Oh no, Sam, I can't do that. I tried to head it off, he apologized. But the DA thought it would make a great human interest piece. Elderly widow and rescue dog saved dozens. His words, not mine. Edna sighed. At 70, she'd never sought the spotlight. The thought of cameras and reporters made her stomach churn. Can you tell them no? I wish I could, Sam replied. But the mayor's already approved it. He thinks it'll be good publicity for Mill Creek. After hanging up, Edna called Beatrice in a panic. Within an hour, her entire quilting circle had descended on the house, armed with hair rollers, makeup, and outfit options. "You'll be fine," Ruth assured her, selecting a powder blue blouse that matched Edna's eyes. "Just speak from the heart about Duke." "But what if they ask about his original owner?" Edna fretted. "What if they're watching and come forward?" Martha squeezed her hand. "Then you'll handle it with the same grace you've handled everything else life has thrown at you." The next morning dawned bright and clear. The television crew arrived precisely at 10, a perky reporter named Jessica, a cameraman, and a sound technician. They set up in Edna's living room, positioning her in Harold's chair with Duke at her feet. "Mrs. Matthews," Jessica began once the cameras were rolling, "tell us how you first encountered the dog now known as Duke." Edna swallowed her nervousness and recounted the stormy night, Duke's persistence, and finding Sam. With each question, she grew more confident, especially when describing the dogfighting ring bust. "It was all Duke," she emphasized. "He knew what he was doing from the start, finding Sam, then leading us back to those other poor animals." "And how has Duke changed your life?" Jessica asked, her expression genuinely interested. Edna hadn't expected the question. She glanced down at Duke, who gazed up at her with those soulful amber eyes. "I lost my husband 6 months ago," she admitted, her voice softening. "I thought my life was essentially over. Then this dog appeared on my doorstep in the middle of a storm, asking for help." She smiled, blinking back unexpected tears. "I've been afraid of dogs since childhood, you know. But Duke, he's taught me that it's never too late to overcome your fears. Never too late to find purpose again." Jessica nodded, visibly moved. "And what happens now? Will you keep Duke?" "That depends," Edna replied honestly. "We're checking to see if he belongs to someone. If he does, I'll have to let him go." Her voice cracked slightly. It would be difficult, but it would be the right thing to do. After the crew packed up and left, promising the segment would air that evening, Edna felt strangely drained yet relieved. She'd survived her television debut. That afternoon, her phone rang again. It was Dr. Winters. "Edna, we got a hit on Duke's microchip," he said without preamble. "A family from Houston. They've been looking for him for over a year." The room seemed to tilt around her. "A family? The Jacksons. Their son has special needs. Autism, I believe. Duke was specially trained as a therapy dog for him. They lost Duke during a camping trip in the state park near Canyon Creek, around the time of that big landslide last spring." Edna sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Duke, sensing her distress, pressed against her knees, looking up with concerned eyes. "I've contacted them," Dr. Winters continued gently. "They're driving up tomorrow." They were overwhelmed to hear he's alive. "Of course they were," Edna whispered, her heart breaking even as she forced herself to be rational. A special needs child who had lost his therapy dog. How could she possibly compete with that? "I'm sorry, Edna," Dr. Winters said. "I know how much he means to you." After hanging up, Edna sat motionless, tears streaming silently down her face. Duke whined softly, pawing at her lap until she lifted him up beside her. For hours, they sat together as evening shadows lengthened across the floor. Beatrice called just after 7. "Edna, you're on television. You look wonderful." Her voice dropped. "Are you okay? You sound like you've been crying." "They found his family, B," Edna managed. "A little boy with special needs. Duke was his therapy dog." "Oh, Edna." Beatrice's voice was full of compassion. "When? They're coming tomorrow." Edna stroked Duke's head, memorizing the feel of his silky ears, the warmth of his body against hers. "I always knew this might happen. I didn't expect it to hurt this much." That night, Edna broke her own rule and let Duke sleep on her bed. Neither of them rested much. Edna too consumed with grief at the impending separation, Duke seemingly sensing her distress. As dawn broke, she made a decision. She would face this with dignity, for Duke's sake and for the boy who had missed him for so long. "You were never really mine to keep," she told Duke as the sun rose. "But you saved me all the same, and I'll never forget that." By mid-morning, Edna had worked herself into a flurry of activity. She bathed Duke, brushing his golden coat until it gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows. She packed a small bag with his favorite toys, the special treats he loved, and detailed notes about his routines and preferences. "They should know you like to sleep with a pillow," she told Duke as she wrote. "And that you're afraid of the vacuum cleaner, but not thunderstorms." Her hand trembled slightly. "And that you always need a good morning belly rub or you get grumpy." Duke watched her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. When the doorbell rang at precisely 11, he barked once but remained by Edna's side as she smoothed her dress and took a deep breath. "This is it, boy," she whispered, steeling herself before opening the door. On her porch stood a family of three, a tall man with kind eyes, a petite woman with an anxious expression, and between them, a boy of about 10 with tousled brown hair and a gaze fixed firmly on his shoes. The father held out his hand. "Mrs. Matthews? I'm David Jackson. This is my wife, Rachel, and our son, Tyler. We can't thank you enough for taking care of Duke." Edna shook his hand, finding her voice. "Please, come in. And call me Edna." As they entered the living room, Duke remained remarkably still, watching the newcomers. Tyler kept his eyes down, his body tense, fingers twisting the hem of his shirt, clear signs of his anxiety. Rachel Jackson knelt beside her son. "Tyler, look," she said gently. "It's Duke. Remember Duke?" Slowly, the boy lifted his head. When his eyes fell on Duke, his entire demeanor transformed. His face lit up with such pure joy that Edna felt her heart constrict. "Duke!" Tyler cried, his voice cracking with emotion. He dropped to his knees, arms outstretched. That was all it took. Duke bounded forward, whining with excitement, his whole body wiggling as he reached the boy. Tyler threw his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in the golden fur, and for the first time since they'd arrived, Edna saw tears streaming down his face. "You came back," Tyler whispered. "You really came back." Rachel wiped away her own tears as she watched the reunion. "Tyler hasn't spoken that clearly in months," she explained to Edna. "Not since Duke disappeared." David nodded, his expression a mixture of gratitude and wonder. Duke was specially trained to help Tyler with his autism. He can sense when Tyler's about to have a meltdown and helps calm him. When we lost Duke during that camping trip, Tyler regressed significantly. His therapists were concerned he might never fully recover. Edna listened, her heart both breaking and healing simultaneously as she watched Duke lick Tyler's face, eliciting giggles from the boy who had been so withdrawn just moments before. "How did you lose him?" she asked softly. "There was a landslide near our campsite," David explained. "Duke was with Tyler when it happened, but they got separated in the chaos. We searched for weeks. The rescue teams were amazing, but eventually..." His voice trailed off. "We had to tell Tyler that Duke was gone. It was the hardest thing we've ever done. He must have traveled over 100 miles to get here." Edna marveled, watching Duke and Tyler, who now sat on the floor together, the boy's hand never leaving the dog's fur. "He was trying to find his way home," Rachel said. "And instead, he found you. Found me and saved a deputy's life," Edna added, recounting the night of the storm. As she served coffee and the cookies she'd baked that morning, Edna shared the full story of Duke's heroism, both in rescuing Sam and in helping to bust the dogfighting ring. The Jacksons listened with wide eyes, occasionally glancing at Duke with renewed wonder. "He always was special," David said. "But this is remarkable. He's changed my life," Edna admitted. "I've been afraid of dogs since I was a child. But Duke," she swallowed hard, "he helped me find purpose again after my husband died." Understanding dawned in Rachel's eyes. "This must be so difficult for you." Edna nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The afternoon passed with stories shared on both sides. The Jacksons telling how Duke had come into their lives when Tyler was 7, Edna recounting Duke's adventures in Mill Creek. Eventually, David checked his watch reluctantly. "We should get on the road if we want to make it home before dark," he said. "Tyler gets anxious traveling at night." The moment Edna had been dreading had arrived. She retrieved Duke's bag from the kitchen, handing it to Rachel with trembling hands. "His things," she explained, "and notes about his care. Thank you for taking such good care of him," Rachel said softly. "We'll never be able to repay you." Edna knelt beside Tyler, who had barely left Duke's side. "Duke is very special," she told the boy. "You're lucky to have each other." Tyler looked at her directly for the first time. "You kept him safe," he said quietly. "Thank you." The simple words nearly undid her. Edna nodded, unable to speak as she rose to her feet. She walked to the door, each step requiring monumental effort, knowing that once Duke walked out, her house would feel emptier than ever before. As David attached Duke's leash, the golden retriever looked back at Edna, his expression somehow mournful despite the joy of reunion with his boy. He whined softly, pulling against the leash to return to her side, pressing his muzzle into her hand one last time. "It's all right, boy," she whispered, stroking his head. "Go home now. Your family needs you." The Jacksons thanked her again, promising to keep in touch and send updates. But as they walked toward their car, something unexpected happened. Duke suddenly sat down firmly on the gravel driveway, refusing to move. Tyler tugged gently on the leash, confusion crossing his face. "Duke, come," David called, but the dog remained seated, looking from Tyler to Edna and back again, as if torn between two loves. Tyler studied Duke for a long moment, then looked back at Edna standing alone on her porch, arms wrapped around herself against a chill only she could feel. The boy's expression grew thoughtful, an unexpected maturity crossing his features. "Mom, Dad," he said, his voice soft but clear. "Duke loves her too." Rachel and David exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Rachel knelt beside her son. "Tyler, Duke is your dog. We came to take him home." "I know," Tyler replied, surprising everyone with his composure. "But maybe," he hesitated, struggling to express his complex thoughts. "Maybe Duke needs two homes now." David looked from his son to Edna, then back to Duke, who continued to sit firmly between his two families, unwilling to choose. "What are you suggesting, buddy?" "She helped Duke when he was lost," Tyler said, the words coming slowly but deliberately. "Now Duke helps her not be lost too." Edna's heart swelled at the boy's insight. This child, whom others might underestimate because of his autism, had seen straight to the heart of the matter with a wisdom beyond his years. Rachel stood slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Tyler might have a point, David. Duke has formed a bond with Mrs. Matthews, and she did save his life." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Edna asked, hardly daring to hope. David ran a hand through his hair, thinking, "We live in Houston, about 4 hours from here. Maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement. Duke could split his time, like when parents are divorced," Tyler added matter-of-factly, causing the adults to exchange surprised glances. "Shared custody," Rachel said, a smile growing on her face. "Duke could be with us when Tyler most needs him, weekends, school holidays. And he could stay with you the rest of the time." "It would mean a lot of driving," David acknowledged. "But if it would work for everyone." Edna felt hope blooming in her chest. "I could drive to meet you halfway," she offered. "And you're welcome to stay here whenever you visit. I have plenty of room." Tyler approached Edna, Duke following immediately at his side. "Is that okay?" the boy asked, looking up at her with earnest eyes. "Can Duke have two homes?" Edna knelt to Tyler's level, her heart full. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Tyler. Duke has enough love for all of us." And just like that, what had begun as a heartbreaking goodbye transformed into the beginning of something new. An unconventional family bound together by their love for one remarkable golden retriever who had somehow managed to save them all. The late summer sun cast a golden glow over Edna's backyard, where an unusual gathering was taking place. Folding tables draped with cheerful gingham cloths dotted the lawn, laden with homemade dishes brought by the Mill Creek Quilting Club. In the center stood a chocolate cake with Duke's Sanctuary written in blue frosting, surrounded by little fondant dogs. 3 months had passed since the Jacksons had come to claim Duke, and the shared custody arrangement had evolved in ways none of them could have predicted. What began as a solution to Duke's divided loyalty had blossomed into something far more meaningful, a bridge between two worlds and the seed of a new purpose for Edna. "I still can't believe we're really doing this," Edna said to Beatrice, watching the growing crowd of townspeople filing through her back gate. "At my age, starting something so ambitious." "Age is just a number," Beatrice replied, adjusting her floral sun hat. "Look at Ruth. She's 82 and volunteered to run the website." Edna laughed, marveling at how her quiet life had transformed. After the story of Duke and the dogfighting bust had aired on television, offers of support had poured in from across the state. When Edna had hesitantly shared her dream of turning her property into a sanctuary for rescued animals, her quilting friends had immediately mobilized. Martha had connections at the county zoning office. Eleanor's son was a contractor. Ruth's grandson was studying veterinary medicine, and Beatrice, ever practical, had set up a non-profit foundation with impressive efficiency. Mrs. Matthews? Edna turned to find Deputy Sam Thornton, recently promoted to sergeant, approaching with a young woman beside him. "Sam, so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it," he replied with a warm smile. "This is Officer Ginny Ramirez from K-9 training. She's interested in your partnership proposal." Ginny extended her hand. "Sergeant Thornton has told me about your idea to train rescue dogs for police work. It's innovative, taking former victims and turning them into community helpers." Duke was the inspiration, Edna explained, glancing toward the oak tree where Duke lay beside Tyler, the boy reading aloud from a dog-eared comic book. If a dog who survived such trauma can become a hero, imagine what others might do with the right support. Their conversation was interrupted by David Jackson, who approached with an elderly man in tow. "Edna, I'd like you to meet Dr. Peterson from the University of Texas. He's interested in researching the therapeutic benefits of the sanctuary for seniors." "Mrs. Matthews," Dr. Peterson said, shaking her hand enthusiastically. "Your project combines two underserved populations, abandoned animals and socially isolated older adults. The potential health benefits for both are significant." Before Edna could reply, Rachel Jackson called everyone's attention to the center of the yard. "If I could have everyone gather around, we'd like to make a little presentation." The crowd formed a semicircle as Rachel and Tyler stepped forward, Duke at their side wearing a special blue bandana for the occasion. Tyler held a large manila envelope, his expression both nervous and proud. "3 months ago," Rachel began, "our family came to Mill Creek to reclaim our beloved dog, Duke. We expected a simple reunion. Instead, we found an extraordinary woman who had not only saved Duke, but had been saved by him in return." She smiled at Edna. What could have been a painful parting became the beginning of a beautiful partnership. Tyler stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Duke for courage. "Duke helped me learn to be brave," he said, his voice stronger than Edna had ever heard it. "Now he's helping Mrs. Edna help other dogs." He held out the envelope. "This is for the sanctuary." Edna accepted it with trembling hands. Inside was a check from the Jackson Family Foundation, David's technology company, for $50,000. To renovate the barn into proper kennels, David explained amid the gasps from the crowd, and to fund the training program. I don't know what to say," Edna stammered, overwhelmed by their generosity. "There's more," Rachel added with a smile. "Tyler." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "Mrs. Wilson from the TV station wants to make a documentary about Duke and the sanctuary. She says your story inspires people." Edna looked around at the gathered faces, her quilting friends beaming with pride, Sam standing tall in his dress uniform, the Jacksons whom she now considered family, and the townspeople who had rallied behind her vision. At the center of it all was Duke, his golden coat shimmering in the sunlight, watching her with those knowing eyes. "When Harold died," she said, finding her voice at last, "I thought my purpose in life had ended. I was just waiting out my days." She bent to stroke Duke's head. "Then this remarkable animal showed up on my doorstep during a storm, and everything changed." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Duke's sanctuary isn't just about saving animals," Edna continued, surprising herself with her eloquence. "It's about second chances, for the dogs, yes, but also for people like me who thought their useful days were behind them." She gestured to her quilting circle friends. "Beatrice was an accountant before retirement. Now she'll manage our finances. Martha taught literature for 40 years. She'll coordinate our volunteers. Ruth was a nurse. Who better to assist with animal care?" Her voice grew stronger. "We're not just little old ladies with nothing to offer. We have lifetimes of skills that this sanctuary needs." The applause that followed brought color to Edna's cheeks. As the crowd dispersed to enjoy the refreshments, Sam approached her again. "The county sheriff is on board with the K-9 training partnership," he said. "We'll start with 2 rescue dogs next month, see how they take to the program. Duke will show them the ropes," Edna replied confidently. As evening approached, the guests gradually departed, leaving only the Jacksons, who would stay the weekend in Edna's guest rooms. Tyler and Duke had fallen asleep on the porch swing, the boy's arm draped protectively over his dog. Rachel joined Edna, handing her a glass of iced tea. He sleeps better when Duke is near, she said softly. His anxiety has improved so much these past months. The arrangement is working for everyone, then? Edna asked, still sometimes doubtful of her good fortune. Better than we could have imagined, Rachel assured her. Tyler's therapist says his progress has been remarkable. Having Duke part-time, but knowing exactly when they'll be together gives him security. And knowing Duke is doing important work here gives him pride. And your family's generosity to the sanctuary is the least we could do, Rachel interjected. You gave our son back his voice, Edna. There's no price tag for that. As darkness fell, Edna sat alone on her back steps, watching fireflies rise from the grass. Duke, having gently disengaged from the sleeping Tyler, padded over to sit beside her. Look at what you've started, she whispered, scratching behind his ears. A whole sanctuary from one act of heroism. Duke leaned against her, his warmth a comfort in the cooling evening air. 6 months ago, Edna Matthews had been a widow lost in grief, afraid of dogs, and convinced her life had lost its purpose. Now she stood at the threshold of a new chapter, founder of a sanctuary, surrogate grandmother to a special boy, and partner to a remarkable golden retriever who had somehow known exactly who needed saving. The old church bells chimed in the distance, marking the hour. But to Edna, they sounded less like a reminder of time passing and more like a celebration of time reclaimed, of life beginning again, even when you least expect it. 1 year later, the sign at the entrance to Edna's property read, Duke's Second Chance Sanctuary, in cheerful blue lettering. The once quiet farmhouse now buzzed with activity from sunrise to sunset. The old barn had been transformed into a state-of-the-art kennel facility, with adjacent training yards where rescued dogs learn new skills under the watchful eyes of professional trainers and elderly volunteers. Edna stood on her front porch, watching Duke lead a training session with a black Labrador named Shadow who had been rescued from the fighting ring. The dog that had once cowered at loud noises now ran confidently through an agility course, following Duke's example with growing assurance. Looking good, isn't he? Sam Thornton approached, now wearing the uniform of Mill Creek's chief of police. The town's successful K-9 program, built on dogs rehabilitated at Duke's Sanctuary, had brought him well-deserved recognition. Shadow's come a long way, Edna agreed, smiling as the lab completed the course and bounded over to receive praise from his trainer. Hard to believe he's the same terrified creature we found a year ago. Just needed the right second chance, Sam replied, his eyes drifting to the framed newspaper clipping hanging beside Edna's door. The article that had started it all, featuring Duke's heroic rescue. Much like someone else I know. Edna laughed softly. At 71, she now moved with a vigor that surprised even her. The arthritis that had once plagued her seemed less bothersome these days, too busy to command her attention. The documentary crew is coming back next week, she informed Sam. They want to film the graduation ceremony for the new therapy dogs. Tyler coming up for it. The whole Jackson family, Edna confirmed. They wouldn't miss it. Tyler's school is doing a presentation on the sanctuary too. Apparently, he's quite the public speaker now when the subject interests him. Inside the house, the Quilting Club, now officially the Sanctuary Board of Directors, was holding its weekly meeting around Edna's dining table. Through the window, Edna could see Beatrice pointing at budget spreadsheets while Martha took notes on her tablet. The transformation of these retired women into fierce advocates for animal welfare had become another remarkable chapter in the Duke's Sanctuary story. Chief Thornton, Ruth called from the doorway. Could you join us? We're discussing the interstate partnership with that rescue group in Oklahoma. Sam tipped his hat to Edna. Duty calls. Those quilting ladies are scarier than any criminal I've faced. As he headed inside, Edna descended the porch steps and made her way toward the training yard. Duke, spotting her approach, abandoned his supervisory role to trot to her side, gray now frosting his muzzle, but his eyes as bright as ever. Hello, handsome, she greeted, kneeling to embrace him despite her creaky knees. Ready for your checkup with Dr. Winters later? Duke wagged his tail in what Edna had come to recognize as assent. His health remained excellent despite his advancing years, but they took no chances with their founding hero. A car pulled into the driveway, Dr. Peterson from the university and his research team. Their study on the emotional and physical benefits of the sanctuary for senior volunteers had garnered national attention, with preliminary results showing significant improvements in depression rates, cognitive function, and even mobility among the elderly participants. Mrs. Matthews, Dr. Peterson called, waving a journal. The article's been published. We're on the cover of Gerontology today. Edna smiled, unsurprised. The sanctuary's impact had extended far beyond what she'd initially imagined. What began as a refuge for abused animals had become a model for communities nationwide, a place where the forgotten elderly found purpose and the traumatized animals found healing, each rescuing the other in ways no one had anticipated. Later that evening, after the day's bustle had quieted, Edna sat in her favorite spot on the porch swing. Duke lay beside her, his head resting on her lap as she stroked his silky ears. The Jacksons would arrive tomorrow for their monthly visit, Duke's weekend with Tyler, and the house was prepared for their stay. "Quite a year, hasn't it been?" she said softly to Duke. "Remember when I was afraid of dogs? Seems like another lifetime." Duke sighed contentedly, his eyes half closed as twilight deepened around them. The sound of tires on gravel announced an unexpected visitor. Edna squinted in the fading light as a sleek sedan pulled up and a well-dressed woman emerged, clutching a portfolio. "Mrs. Matthews?" the woman called, approaching the porch. "I'm Lisa Carrington from the National Compassion Foundation. I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Edna replied, though Duke sat up alertly beside her. "What can I do for you?" "I've come a long way to meet you in person," Lisa explained, climbing the porch steps. "Your sanctuary has been selected as the model for a nationwide initiative we're launching, connecting seniors and rescue animals in communities across the country." She opened her portfolio, revealing glossy brochures featuring Duke's photograph. "We're calling it the Duke Program. Full funding for 10 new sanctuaries to start, with your facility as the training hub." Edna's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the brochure. "This is overwhelming. We've been following your story since that first television segment," Lisa continued enthusiastically. "What you've built here in 1 year is nothing short of miraculous. The data from Dr. Peterson's research confirms what we suspected. This model works on multiple levels, benefiting both human and animal participants." Duke pressed against Edna's side, offering silent support as he had countless times over the past year. "I never imagined any of this," Edna admitted, looking out over the sanctuary grounds where lights now twinkled in the buildings that had once been empty sheds. "I was just trying to honor what Duke had done, saving that deputy, then those other dogs." Lisa smiled. "Sometimes the greatest visions start with the simplest acts of compassion. Will you consider partnering with us? We need your expertise to make this program successful nationally." As the details of the proposal unfolded, Edna found herself thinking of Harold. He would have been amazed and amused to see his quiet, dog-fearing wife become the founder of a nationally recognized animal sanctuary. She could almost hear his laughter, feel his pride. Later, after Lisa had departed with promises to return for a formal ceremony, Edna and Duke walked the sanctuary grounds one last time before bed. The kennels were quiet, the rescued animals sleeping peacefully. In the small office adjacent to the barn, lights still burned where Sam and Jenny worked late, finalizing training protocols for the newest K-9 candidates. From one stray dog to all of this, Edna marveled, gazing at the sanctuary that had risen from her grief and Duke's courage. Who would have believed it? Duke looked up at her with those wise amber eyes that had seen her at her lowest and stayed by her side as she rebuilt her life. In his gaze, Edna saw the truth that had transformed not just her existence, but an entire community. It's never too late to begin again, never too late to find purpose, never too late to open your heart. The church bells chimed in the distance, no longer marking time passing, but celebrating time redeemed. Edna Matthews, once a grieving widow afraid of dogs, stood tall under the star-filled Texas sky, her hand resting on the golden head of the extraordinary animal who had taught her the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the things we fear most are exactly what we need to save us. And in the peaceful sanctuary grounds surrounding them, dozens of once-forgotten animals and once-overlooked seniors slept soundly, each having found in the other the second chance they needed. All because one remarkable golden retriever had refused to give up on finding help for an injured man on a stormy night, and in doing so, had saved not just a deputy, but an entire community. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell notifications, And if you watched until here, comment, "I watched until here," and share your opinion about this story. And don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very emotional.